Okay, welcome everybody to the resumption of the annual general meeting of Hampshire and the Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Authority following its adjournment on the 9th of June 2026. Thank you very much all for coming. I'm opening the meeting again in the capacity of the authority clerk. As you know, the meeting's being held at our police and fire shared headquarters in Eastleigh, and it's being recorded for broadcast on the authority's website and will also be available for repeated viewing. The press and members of the public are also permitted to film and broadcast this meeting, so those who remain at the meeting are consenting to being filmed and recorded and to the possible use of those images and recording for broadcasting purposes. Now, you should know that there's no scheduled fire alarm test today, so in the event that the alarm does sound, please leave the building through the nearest and safest fire exits. And I'm pleased to say you'll be able to simply follow officers who will guide you to the fire muster point in the car park. Now, all members have a microphone, which, as you know, should be activated by pressing the button to make sure that your voice is clearly heard on the broadcast. So I'll move on now to the first item on the agenda, which is the election of chair. I'll now invite nominations for the position of chair, and each nomination must be proposed and also seconded. Once all of the nominations have been received and confirmed, we'll move to a vote. So I now invite nominations for the position of chair for the current municipal year until the next AGM of the authority in 2027.
Good morning, Chief. I would like to nominate Councillor Pratt-Baines.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder?
Yes, thank you. I'd like to second Councillor Pratt-Baines.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson.
Councillor Drew would like to propose Councillor Ridian Vaughan as well.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Thank you. Okay. Are there any further nominations? No? Okay, thank you. I'll now confirm the nominations that we have and we'll proceed to the vote. So the nominations that we have are for Councillor Baines and for Councillor Vaughan. Please raise your hands if voting for Councillor Baines. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 votes. Thank you. Now, please raise your hands for Councillor Vaughan. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, thank you. So we have 6 votes to 4 in favour of Councillor Baines. So I'll now confirm Councillor Baines as the authority chair. So thank you. We'll now move to a short adjournment for about 10 minutes so that we can make the necessaries and brief Councillor Baines to chair the rest of the meeting. Thank you, everybody. Could we turn off the... Dress him up in something ceremonial.
Okay, colleagues, happy to reconvene this meeting if everyone's ready to get started again. And we move very quickly to item 2, which is the election of Vice Chair. So I'll now invite nominations for the position of Vice Chair, and each nomination must be proposed and seconded. And once nominations have been received and confirmed, a vote will be taken. So I now invite nominations for the position of Vice Chair for the current municipal year until the next annual general meeting of the authority in 2027. Councillor Harrison.
Good morning, Chairman. I would like to nominate Karen Lucioni.
Thank you, Councillor Harrison. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Ferguson? Yes, thank you very much.
I'd like to nominate Councillor Ridian.
Okay, thank you.
And I will second that.
Thank you, Councillor Drew. Right. So as there are 2 candidates proposed, the voting will be conducted by a show of hands. So please raise your hands if voting for Councillor Lucioni. 1, 2, 3. Okay, that is 6 votes recorded there. And please raise your hands if voting for Councillor Vaughan. 3, 4. 4 votes there. Okay. So with 6 votes, Councillor Lucioni is the Vice Chair of the Fire Authority for the current municipal year until 2027. Congratulations, Councillor Lucioni. I invite you to be seated at the head of the table there. Okay. Brilliant. Thank you very much. Okay, so we move to item 3, which is apologies for absence. I'd like to ask Katie Sherwood if there have been any apologies for absence.
Thank you. We've had apologies from Councillor Terry Norton.
Okay, thank you very much. Brilliant. Okay, item 4 is declarations of interest. I'd like to ask that members declare an interest in any item either now or at the relevant point on the agenda. Are there any declarations of interest at the moment? No. Okay. Brilliant. We move to item 5, which is the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 10th of February 2026 on pages 5 to 12 in your agenda packs. Does any member wish to comment on the open minutes of the previous meeting on a point of accuracy or any matters arising at all? No comments. Okay, brilliant. Could I suggest that it's proposed and seconded and agreed by everyone? Is there a proposal? Yeah. Okay, excellent. Thank you, Councillor Madgwick. Brilliant. Okay, so that brings us on to deputations. We don't have any deputations at today's meeting. Swiftly on to item 7, which is Chair's announcements. I'll keep it very, very brief, considering I've only been Chair for about 7 minutes. Just like to say thank you all for this wonderful opportunity to chair the Fire Authority. I'd like to thank my colleagues, Councillor Ferguson and Councillor Harrison, for proposing and seconding me, and also colleagues for your support. I'd like to put on record a thanks to the previous Chair, Vice Chair and Authority members for their diligent work. As a former Hampshire retained firefighter myself, this organisation is something that I truly care about, and I'm determined to make a positive contribution to the authority over the year ahead, ensuring that Hampshire and Isle of Wight continue to have an efficient and effective service which makes life safe for everyone. I look forward to working with you all in the year ahead. Thank you. Okay, so item 8, which is the appointments report on pages 13 to 32. And I'd like to invite Paul Hodgson, Monitoring Officer, to introduce this report, please. Paul, thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good morning, members. So a similar version of this report comes to the annual general meeting each year, usually in June, and the report seeks to deal with the set-up, appointments and some other administrative matters to enable the authority to discharge its functions for the coming municipal year. So the report sets out the overall political membership of the authority, reflecting the appointments made by each constituent authority following the elections and AGMs in May. It then sets out the political groupings on the fire authority and then the associated allocation of seats across the two standing committees. And the political groups, as you all will be aware now, are the Conservative group with 3 members, the Reform UK group with 2 members, and the Liberal Democrat, Labour and Independent group with 6 members. So the authority is asked to appoint members to the committees in accordance with the seat allocation shown in the additional item 8 on ModGov called item 8 updated proportionality table. So when we come to the recommendations, we will need the names of the members from each group who are being appointed and the substitute member from each group. The report goes on to deal with a number of other appointments and other matters, mostly set out in paragraphs 20 to 22. So that includes the approval of the current schedule of meetings for the year ahead. There's an appointment of 1 member to the pension board to fill the vacancy there left by Councillor Price, no longer being on the authority. There's a requirement to appoint 3 members to the Principal Officer's Pay Review Working Group and identify 1 member as chair. That, as a working group, proportionality requirements don't strictly apply to that, so members can appoint as they wish to that. The report also seeks confirmation of the minority group spokespersons, and members will probably be aware the allowances scheme provides for an allowance for the principal opposition group spokesperson, which would normally be the group leader of the second largest group. It also provides for an other group spokesperson allowance, usually for the group leader of then any other political group. There is the usual confirmation in there of the appointment of whichever member is appointed as chair of the 3S Fire Stakeholder Committee is also then the shareholder representative for the purposes of the 3S Fire Articles of Association. And then in this year's report, we've covered a couple of other appointments, not of elected members, but we've got an appointment of an independent co-opted member of the Audit and Governance Committee, and that follows a process that was undertaken by the Audit and Governance Committee to appoint a independent co-opted member in line with SIPFA guidance. And then there is also a further appointment of a second independent person, so that the authority would have 2 rather than 1, and the independent person has a role in relation to any code of conduct complaints against members. And linked to those, there's an amendment to the Audit and Governance Committee's terms of reference, just to reflect the appointment of the independent co-opted member. So part of the recommendations ask you as the authority to approve those amended terms of reference for the Audit and Governance Committee. And then the report deals with the usual dispensations that are agreed each year as a bit of a belt and braces exercise, just to ensure that there is no question around members taking part in discussions, debate or items around the members' allowance scheme or setting the precept. And then finally, we've got a minor change to the members' allowances scheme to include a new allowance for the co-opted independent member of the Audit and Governance Committee. And again, that was something that went through Audit and Governance Committee, was approved and recommended to yourselves for agreement. So that, I think, is what is contained in the report. I'm very happy to take questions, and when it comes to the recommendations, we probably will need to just work through those fairly methodically.
Yes, Councillor Drew.
Well, just looking at your agenda item 8, you've got the Liberal Democrat, Labour and Independent group. Are they a declared group?
Yes.
They've declared, okay.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions at all for Paul? No, okay. Are there any other comments from members to make on this? Okay, Paul, do you have any closing remarks at all? Or? No, nothing further to add, Chair. Do you suggest we work through it, as you suggested, methodically and...
Yes, I think that's pretty sensible, and we can try and capture the appointment.
Okay, right. Okay, so...
The recommendations start on page 13.
Yeah. Okay, so would you like us to go through each? Okay. So number 3 under recommendation is that the authority approves the schedule of meetings of the authority and its committees over the coming year at Appendix 3. Agreed. Okay, brilliant. Number 4, that for purposes of Part 1 of the Local Government and Housing Act 1989, the authority agrees that the allocation of seats on the Audit and Governance Committee and the 3S Fire CIC Stakeholder Committee of the authority be set out in Appendix 2 of the report. Agreed. That the authority appoints members of the Audit and Governance Committee and the 3S Fire CIC Stakeholder Committee, including 1 substitute member per political group, and their respective chairs and vice chairs, following the agreed allocation of seats at recommendation 4. So if we can just take a moment on this to put forward each group's... Councillor Madrick.
Mine's probably the easiest one. Myself, I'll be doing the Audits and Governance Committee. Obviously, then Councillor Terry Norton will be the substitute. Equally, Councillor Norton will be the 3S Fire representative, and I'll be the substitute.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, and for the Conservative group?
Audit and Governance, Councillor Drew, and I'll be the substitute, and 3S Fire, Fran, and I'll be the substitute.
Okay, brilliant. And for our group, for Audit and Governance, it is the Councillor Harrison, Councillor Ferguson, and Councillor Lucioni. And the 3 for 3S Fire are Councillor Ansell, Councillor Greenhow, and Councillor Harrison again. So that's the 3 for 3S Fire. Okay.
Chair, we also need the chair and vice chair for each, and substitute from your group as well. So.
Okay. And proposing and seconding is needed for that, is it, Paul?
No, it's simply an appointment by the authority. Okay. So.
Okay, so the proposal from our group is to put forward Councillor Harrison as Chair of Audit and Governance and Councillor Ferguson as Vice Chair of Audit and Governance. And the proposal for 3S Fire is to put forward Councillor Ansell as Chair of 3S Fire and Councillor Greenhow as Vice Chair of 3S Fire. We need a substitute for each group as well, don't we? So, Councillor Madrick, have you got a substitute for both? Both substitutes completed. Councillor Vaughan? Okay, and do we have a substitute for... You're down as a member on 3S Fire, yeah. for 3S Fire, yeah. And are you happy, Councillor Ansell, to be a substitute on audit and governance? Yeah, okay, brilliant. So that's the substitutes agreed on there. Right.
Chair, would it be helpful if Katie just confirms
Yep,
all of
more than
those
happy.
nominations and then members can confirm they're agreed? It'll make sure we've got them right as well.
Okay, so for Audit and Governance, we have Councillor Harrison as Chair, Councillor Ferguson as Vice Chair, and then we also have Councillor Lucioni, Councillor Drew, Councillor Madgwick. For substitutes, we have Councillor Norton, Councillor Vaughan, and I just need to double check the substitute for the Ansell. Lovely, thank you. Okay, and then for 3S Fire, we've got Councillor Ansell as Chair, Councillor Greenhow as Vice Chair. Then we have Councillor Harrison, Councillor Carpenter, Councillor Norton, and then for substitutes, we have Councillor Madgwick, Councillor Vaughan, and Councillor Lucioni.
Okay. Brilliant. Right. Appoints members. Okay, so number 6, that the authority appoints one member as a scheme employer representative on the pension board for the coming year in accordance with paragraph 20. Are there any volunteers to Councillor Lucioni? Seems to be the only volunteer. Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Lucioni. Number 7, that the authority agrees that APHE includes all appointed Hampshire and Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Authority members set out in paragraph 22 until the AGM in 2027. Agreed? Okay, brilliant. That the authority appoints 3 members and identifies one of these as chair to an informal working group called the Principal Officer Pay Review Group as detailed in paragraph 22B until the AGM in 2027, and as suggested by the monitoring officer, I'm happy to take a representative from each political group. Councillor Norton as one, Katie, Councillor Vaughan, and I'm happy to be on that as well, Katie, and myself. Yeah. Yeah, I'm happy to chair that. Yeah. Okay, Principal Officer Review Group. Right, number 9, that the minority group spokesperson is confirmed until the annual general meeting of the authority in 2027, set out in paragraph 22C. Okay. Councillor Vaughan. Okay, thank you. Number 10, that the authority agrees that the chair of the stakeholder committee be appointed as the shareholder representative for 3S Fire CIC pursuant to Article 42 of the Articles of Association of 3S Fire CIC set out in paragraph 22D of the report until the annual meeting of the authority in 2027. Okay, we're happy with that. Brilliant. Thank you, members. Number 11, that the authority appoints Mark O'Byes as the independent co-opted member of the Audit and Governance Committee for a term of up to 4 years commencing on June the 9th, 2026, as set out in paragraph 22F. Agreed? Okay. Number 12, that the authority approves the amended terms of reference for the Audit and Governance Committee as set out in Appendix 4 on paragraph 22F. Agreed. Okay, brilliant. Number 13, that the authority appoints Richard Andrews as a second independent person for a term of up to 4 years commencing on the 9th of June 2026 as set out in paragraph 22F. Agreed. 14, that the authority grants dispensations until the 30th of June 2027 under sections 33, 2A and D of the Localism Act 2011 and in respect of the provisions of sections 4A and B of the Localism Act, and then the A and B to that is that to all members to enable them to participate and vote in any business of the authority relating to the setting of council tax or precepts when they would otherwise be prevented from doing so, in consequence of a beneficial interest in land within the administrative area of the authority, and to all members in receipt of an allowance under the authority members' allowances scheme or another authority members' allowances scheme, enabling them to participate and vote in any business of the authority where they may otherwise be prevented from doing so in consequence of being in receipt of a member's allowance. We agreed with that, members? It's a bit of a mouthful. Yeah. Okay. Number 15. That having had regard to any relevant recommendations of the constituent authorities' independent remuneration panels, the authority approves an amendment to the members' allowances scheme to include a new allowance for the co-opted independent member of the Audit and Governance Committee of £1,804.62 per annum, as set out in paragraph 22G and at Appendix 5. You happy with that, members? Okay, agreed. Thank you. Okay, right. I think we're background. Okay. Paul, can I ask whether we need to agree any other committee appointments outside of that?
No, I think that's all done. Katie, you can go.
Okay, brilliant. That's great. Right. Okay, right. Recommendations. Okay, right, we can move to item 9, which is the outturn report. Bear with me 1 second. 33. Okay, so this report contains recommendation E, which includes an exempt Appendix B2 capital outturn, forecast and funding. Can I ask members to confirm that they have read the exempt appendix and to indicate whether they want to ask any questions or debate any matters contained in it in an exempt session? Okay, that's a no. Thank you, members. Okay, so the recommendations can be taken in the open part of the meeting. I'd like to invite Rob Safras to introduce the report, please.
Thank you. Good morning, members. So I'm going to talk you through the end-of-year financial report. So that's part of the annual financial cycle that we have. It's looking back on the 25-26 financial year. So I'll talk through the revenue budget position, the capital programme, and also look at reserves and the authority's cash investments and borrowing. There's also a section in the report that looks forward to the 26-27 financial year and beyond as well. And that very much links in with the reports that you'll receive over the course of the coming year. So there'll be quarterly finance update reports and then the budget setting report in February. So a logical place to start with looking at the outturn for 25-26 is to go back to the budget that was set in February 2025 by the authority. And there's a key element of that, which was that there was an unmitigated budget gap forecast when the budget was being prepared. And so what the authority at the time agreed was that £1.8 million would be drawn from reserves on a one-off basis to balance the budget, and that £1.7 million of in-year savings would be delivered. So when we're looking at the outturn position for the 25-26 year, it's helpful to have that position as context. So the outturn position has been forecast during the year to be between about £1.1 million and £1.3 million. The final position was a £1.572 million underspend, which means that excluding that draw from the budget equalisation reserve that I mentioned, it would have been about 240k overspent. So the outturn position is positive. It shows there's a number of reasons for that underspend that I'll talk through, and it reflects the combination of the early achievement of some of the savings that the authority has delivered, as well as some in-year underspends against the budget as well, which are set out across Table 1 and then explained beneath Table 2. So the key underspend was against the Green Book and support staff budget. During the year, one of the things that took place was the authority carried out a piece of organisational design work to deliver savings. A number of vacancies were held during that period against the Green Book budget, and there was an underspend reported for the year. We also had the benefit of some one-off and temporary higher income relating to investment income, asset disposals, and a compensation payment. And on the opposite side of things, there was some a pressure on the premises budget. So we had two essential unbudgeted requirements that needed to be funded, and some uninsured costs as well, which have been reported through previous meetings of the authority. And then a change in the final quarter of the year was a higher than expected backdated business rates assessment that created a pressure in the year, but also creates a forward-looking pressure as well. There was a recommendation in the February report that the underspend that was forecast would be split between the budget equalisation reserve to help mitigate future funding challenges and the insurance risk reserve. With the global events that have taken place since the budget was set, there's additional interest rate risk as well now. And so there's also a recommendation to put part of the underspend, which was the additional difference between investment income and capital financing costs against the budget, into the capital and investment risk reserve. There were also a number of planned activities for the year that couldn't be completed, largely due just to the timing of being able to get those things done. And so there are some recommendations within Table 4 for some carry forwards for the authority to consider and approve to allow that activity to happen within the 26-27 financial year. Table 5 talks about provisions. So provisions are where we've got a liability, but we don't know the exact timing or amount of the payment that we're likely to have to make, but we know enough to be able to make a charge to the account. So there's a recommendation related to provisions. Table 6 in the report then talks about efficiency. So I mentioned the in-year target for the year of delivering £1.7 million of savings, with a further amount happening in 26-27, just because of the timing of implementing those changes. So the full year effect wouldn't happen until 26-27. So progress on that's been reported throughout the year, and the authority has managed to deliver savings in excess of the target, which is positive because it all helps to contribute towards closing the ongoing budget gap that is forecast throughout the medium-term financial plan. The report also includes in an appendix the annual productivity and efficiency return that we're required to submit to the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government, which was submitted during May. So as well as the day-to-day running expenditure for the authority also needs to invest in assets to deliver services over the medium and longer term. That is principally the investment in vehicles and the estate. And so the report includes an update on the expenditure in that area in the year as well. So about £12 million was spent during the year. I think it's important to remember that the authority receives no capital grant funding from central government. So all of this capital expenditure to fund these assets needs to come from local resources. Sometimes there might be a capital receipt to contribute towards that, but it's primarily the use of reserves and the use of borrowing to fund that expenditure. So that then links into the Treasury Management section of the report. So this is talking about the authority's cash balances, investments and borrowing. There's a Treasury Management strategy that gets set in February each year, and then that delegates authority to me to carry out Treasury Management activity in line with the strategy that you've set. So as part of that during the year, there was just over £15 million of new external borrowing from the PWLB that was taken out to support the approved capital programme. The weighted average interest rate on that was 4.74%, and having secured that borrowing, it helps to mitigate some of the risk with potentially higher interest rates in the current and looking ahead into the future. The report also gives an update on reserves. So reserves are an important part of the authority's financial resilience and also its financial planning. So there's two key reasons for holding reserves. One of those is to put money aside to fund future planned expenditure. So similar to a household saving up for big items of expenditure that you need to buy in infrequent patterns. And then reserves also offer mitigation for financial risk as well. So putting aside a rainy day fund. Reserves balances have gone up over the last year, but they are forecast to go down, as you can see in the graph underneath paragraph 41. And that's primarily due to investment in the capital programme. Moving on then to the forward-looking section. So the medium-term financial plan was updated in February as part of the budget setting report papers, and that identified a budget gap for all 3 years of the MTFP. The authority approved some temporary mitigations to close the budget gap for 26-27. There's a legal requirement to set a balanced budget, but it left a gap to address for 27-28 and beyond. And so there was a commitment in that report that the Chief Fire Officer, myself and the executive group would go away and look at proposals for how to close that budget gap in a way that was sustainable, consistent with the safety plan, consistent with the authority's financial management principles and any other requirements that we have to meet. So that work's been progressing in the meantime, and an update will be brought to the authority in October. And that was everything I was going to highlight from the report, but obviously there's a lot in that report. I'm very happy to take any questions that anyone might have.
Okay, are there any questions, members? Councillor Harrison?
Yeah, it's a comment from me, Chairman. I mean, I think what this report does is it demonstrates a prudent stewardship of our finances, which is probably one of the key elements if you're running an organisation that has the safety of the public at hand. Nationally, there's been a lot of talk about the defence of the nation, and I'm acutely aware that this isn't just about buying more weapons and supporting the military. It's also really important that we talk about civil resilience, and I think that the fire service plays a major role in that. So I think my plea would be, going forward to government, is that they consider being a little more generous, not just to this fire authority, but to all fire authorities, because the demands are increasing exponentially. And I know that firefighters spend about half their time now doing things which are not mandated by government. They don't have to do them, but very clearly the people that we represent expect us to do them. So there needs to be a discussion with the public, and I'm very happy to assist, as I'm sure other members would do so in that sort of dialogue. But we've kept the show on the road, and that's the most important thing. And I think congratulations to all the officers in all the departments of the fire service who've contributed to that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Harrison. We have Councillor Ferguson and then Councillor Drew.
Thank you, Chair. I have 2 questions. Chair, do you want me to do them individually or both together?
Both together is fine, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
So one is just on the business rates and the premises pressures. obviously in the report you talk about how you are unaware of a backdated need to pay business rates. I just wondered whether we have other properties and what work is being done to check that there aren't other properties that may have a similar issue because of the pressures it puts on the budget. So that's a sort of a small question. A broader question is on the reserves. Obviously, we currently have quite good reserves, but there are in the report a huge amount of capital investment coming to bring the reserves down to 10 million. So my question is really, is there more to which that 10 million might have to be allocated? And for our perspective, from a governance perspective, is there a sort of a level to which reserves cannot fall below? That would be really helpful to know both those things. And just also to say I absolutely echo Councillor Harrison's comment at the beginning. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. Rob, would you like to come back on those two questions, please? Thank you.
Thank you. I'll let Matt just answer on the business rates one, and then I'll cover reserves.
No problem.
Thank you, Councillor, for the question. So the business rate mentioned in that report is to do with the new build premises that hadn't been fully, the rateable value of that was still moving. So then once that was confirmed, once the works were done and everything was signed off, it was then backdated accordingly. So it's not something we would expect to see where there's more stability across other premises. We do undertake regular reviews of business rates, most recently done in early 25, which actually provided a saving on the rates to the authorities. That was a really positive outcome of that work. We are in the throes of doing some minor reviews on specific properties this year, just to make sure that we're comfortable with them. So it is a routine process to make sure they're at the right level. The one in that report was sort of an anomaly because it was a brand new building and it was the rateable value adjusted as a consequence.
Thank you. And in terms of the reserves question, so there's sort of two parts to that, I think. So the first part was about the plans for the spend from reserves. As quite rightly you said, they're going to drop based on current plans. So one of the things that we've been looking at as we've been looking at how we could close the budget gap is particularly with Matt's area where a lot of things are to do with investment in the estate and vehicles, and also other equipment and ICT. How can we're looking at, are all of those things essential, and are all of those things still the priority that they were when the earmark was first made, so that we can look at things as a whole to make sure that we're getting the best out of the limited pot of money that the authority's got to do all the things that it needs to do. So that will be one of the things that will be updated in October. The question about whether the reserves are adequate and sort of to what level is a sort of a minimum amount to hold. So one of the things that I have to do as the Section 151 officer is to provide a Section 25 report in February alongside the budget, and I have to provide my views on the adequacy of the reserves that the authority has. One of the things that was set out in February this year was, historically, we've held a relatively low general reserve of about 2.5% of revenue expenditure, but relatively high earmarked balances compared with other fire and rescue authorities. But as the plan, the sort of the earmarked reserves are forecast to reduce and be used over time, there was a recommendation in that report pack to increase the level of the general reserve up to 5% of general revenue expenditure. So the combination of putting aside enough money to work with Matt in particular to look at what are we going to need to invest in over time, making sure we can cover off either through reserves or through borrowing that expenditure, but also having suitable risk mitigation reserves set aside. Does that answer your question?
Yes, Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Chair. That's really helpful and also reassuring. So I will look forward to, I'm sure we'll all look forward to seeing that report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Drew.
Yep. Thank you very much. I just wanted to follow up and pick up on what Councillor David Harrison said about defence of the realm, sort of you're right, but most of that defence is going to be kinetic weaponry, stuff that explodes, and frankly we will need more of that. But I'm all for going back to government and as we now have our saviour in number 10, either north or south, we should be clear about what it is that we want a bit more money for, because I like the idea of building a greater resilience, and as we know, as a local authority, we have been forced to strip our reserves, whether that be here in the Fire Authority, and certainly at Hampshire County Council, and I suspect Southampton and Portsmouth as well will have seen their reserves reduced, because that's been government policy. So if we want more money from our saviour, we need to be clear about what it is that we want. And I'm very happy to work with anyone who comes up with some proposals that specifically focus on community and society resilience. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Drew. Councillor Carpenter.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we've all seen in the last few days the amazing work that the fire service has carried out on the Isle of Wight and other areas where we've had wildfires. I just want to put on record my thanks, and I'm sure the authorities' thanks for everything they've done, watching those fire engines going across on the ferry. Fantastic. What I wanted to know was really those activities, unplanned activities like that on such a scale, is there any future effect on our finances? Are we planning ahead to deal with such exceptional circumstances which are more likely to happen in the future as well? It's slightly off report, but I thought it was really important to say that today.
Yeah, no, completely agree, Councillor Carpenter, and well said. Rob, would you like to come back on that?
Thank you. So I can comment on the financial side of things, and other people may be better placed to comment from a sort of a safety plan perspective, but it's one of the things that we need to do is to make sure that our medium-term financial plan is very much aligned with the safety plan, and with making sure that those changes in risk that are being identified are matched up with making sure that we allocate the resources in the right way to deal with that. So within the budget, we obviously have a budget for whole-time firefighters and for on-call firefighters, which the on-call in particular is affected by the number of incidents that needed to be attended. But I don't know if someone else wants to pick up the Chancellor. Would you like to?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Carpenter. I think it's just a general point, really, in terms of the safety plan. Obviously, the authority's commitment and contract, as you will, with the community has to be completely factored on the risks that we face. So that, whilst the current safety plan was 25 to 30, so a 5-year lookout, as it were, we look at that every single year. So it is iterative, both in terms on an annual basis, but also then looking more into the future. And absolutely, it's very helpful that the platform that the NFCC has in terms of lobbying government and raising the profile of what is not just happening in our locality, but, you know, so taking wildfires as an example, but across the UK. So yes, very much what we're doing.
Yes. Yes, please.
Good morning, members. Just some information that we have to give a bit of a context. The first 2 weeks in July was around £160,000 worth of vehicle movements, overtime and on-call costs. That doesn't include the recent fires that we've had on the Isle of Wight, which would be significant there. So to just give you a flavour of the cost, I think it's also worth pointing out that we do have an island. And when you look at the police and other people, there is I'm not sure what it is, but a recognition that running an organisation with an island which will have travel costs, some organisations receive extra money for that, whereas us as an authority don't currently. So I just thought it would be useful as that question came out just to share those operational considerations that we need to have with our finances.
Thanks very much for all the input from officers. That's been really helpful. Councillor Vaughan.
Thanks, Chairman. Can I just follow on from what Fran said about the Isle of Wight movement and ask the Chief if he can just mention, we got a very encouraging message from the Lord Lieutenant of the Isle of Wight, which is worth mentioning, Chief.
Yes, thank you. We had a lovely letter which we've shared with staff. thanking us for the efforts of all of our firefighters and all of our staff and all of our partners as well that were involved in dealing with the response to the fire. Just to finally touch on some of the points that that the councillor made, I think it's worth mentioning as well that our entire setup as a fire and rescue service is as a risk-based organisation. We're very different to, say, policing or the NHS, which is very demand-led. We have to assess the risk that we have in the county through our safety plan and then make a provision with our resources to meet that risk, which, as the Deputy Chief said, we do year on year, iteratively. But there are also additional costs. When we do have spate conditions and large or protracted incidents, as the Assistant Chief just pointed out, we do have schemes such as Bellwyn that we can lean into to recoup some of those costs, but in practice, the threshold is high and it's not always easy to have those costs recouped by the service. So actually, as part and parcel of our financial planning, we need to acknowledge that we have to provide sufficient resource to be able to respond to these spate conditions, these increases in demand as they happen alongside the baseline requirement to resource to risk that we have. And it can be challenging. It can be challenging from a financial perspective, but also from a human resource perspective as well, because these are real people who are working incredibly hard to deal with these incidents. And I just want to acknowledge that as part of the discussions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chief. Are there any other members wishing to ask any questions at this point? No? Okay, brilliant. I'd just like to ask if Rob has any closing remarks to make at all.
No, nothing further from me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So we can move to the recommendations, which are on page 34. Just to remind members that the recommendation includes that exempt appendix, noting the earlier agreement that discussion of the exempt appendix wasn't required and that a vote on the recommendation could therefore be taken in a public session. So moving to the vote on this item, could I have all those in favour, please? Okay, agreed. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Right, item 10, which is the 2025-2026 annual performance report on pages 117 to 160. And I'd like to invite Matt Robertson to introduce the report, please. Matt.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. This is our annual performance report, which looks and provides an overview of our performance across the 25-26 financial year, so up until the 31st of March 2026. It's structured, and if I just draw your attention to page 128, so I'll just talk through the appendix for you, which is the public-facing report. It's structured in three parts. The first part provides an overview of the safety plan improvements, so the activities set by the authority last year for the service to deliver. The second part provides the overview of that performance against our 5 strategic objectives, which are set within the authority's safety plan. And then the last part provides a snapshot of the year ahead, so predominantly focused on the areas of performance where we wish to improve further or to develop particular themes or activities further. So in light of that, I'll just summarise quickly page 130, which is the safety plan activities for the last financial year. There were 49 activities categorised as must, so activities which the service absolutely must deliver in that year, of which I'm pleased to report all 49 were successfully completed, and this included activities related to the Grenfell and Manchester Arena inquiries and subsequent reports. Some examples of some of those activities you can see on page 131 for your awareness. Moving on to the second section, page 133 of your packs, just shows you the structure that we'll talk through in the performance part of this document. The 5 strategic objectives are on that page, page 133, and the performance report takes each in turn. I'll not go through every single metric. You may have questions on some of the others, but I'll just highlight.
Just a procedural thing. I don't know, Chair, sorry, if there's an issue with the online, all the paperwork I've got, but all the numbers of the pages seem completely out of order. And I think that's relevant to the minutes as well. So the recommendation of the previous report was on 32, not 34. This report has started on 115, not 117, as the front sheet says. And every time Matt has mentioned a page, not his fault at all, it's not the right page. So 130 is actually at 133 is actually at 131. So I don't know if there's a technical issue here.
We can certainly look into that, Councillor Madrick. On my page, it's come up correctly, so it might be an issue with your device, but we can certainly look into that post meeting. But thanks for highlighting it. Okay, no problem at all. Sorry there, Matt.
That's okay.
What's that?
Not sure if my brain will let me deduct 2 every time or add 2 every time, but sorry about that. So on page 135, or 133 perhaps, the incidents that we've had over the last year. So in the 25-26 year, we had just over 21,000 incidents, which is slightly higher than the previous year, although overall volumes remain fairly stable. Importantly, that includes around a 17% increase in fires from the previous year, largely driven by the increase in outdoor fires. So that is fires in grassland, woodland and crops. So that is to do with the prolonged period of warm weather we had in the summer of 2025. So overall, there was a 54% increase in those types of fires compared to the year previously. More specifically, on our other calls, our false alarms have reduced, which is a positive trend. Members who are on the authority in the previous year will recall a change to our policy of attending false alarms, particularly where they're non-residential. So we don't attend them unless there's a confirmed fire between the hours outlined in the report. That has seen a 26% reduction in non-residential false alarms. And you'll see in the bottom column on the left-hand side of page 135 that in the first 6 months of that policy, it has saved around £56,000 of call-out cost for our on-call staff and around 340 hours saved on other staff. So that is hours that can be used to deliver other critical activities. Positively, our co-responding has started to see an increase, and we've really had a lot of focused efforts by teams to really engage with the ambulance service and to look at the offer that we provide on on-call, and that 15% increase is therefore a real positive change. In terms of how we compare to others, you'll see in the bottom of page 135 2 graphs. So you can see that we compare very favourably to other services in terms of the number of co-responding calls that we do, which is the solid line on the right-hand graph, and so a significant increase in those calls. In terms of on-call availability, so on the next page, again, a positive trend, and again, that is positively seen when you look nationally and regionally as well. So our average on-call availability has increased by 2% from the year before. Some of our stations, though, have got really, really good attendance. So 13 of our on-pump stations have got over 80% or higher availability, so a huge effort on those stations of being available when we need them. As you know, on-call availability is a national challenge. It is not something that only Hampshire and the Isle of Wight face, and it's particularly stark in the south east, where the average on-call on the south east is around 44%. So our 64% is really stark in terms of really positively being different. Equally, the trend on that, our on-call, as you can see in the graph on the top of page 136, is generally in an upwards trend, whilst in the southeast, the average is continually to decline year on year. So we are bucking the trend regionally. Turning the page onto page 137, our critical response times. This includes our call handling times. It includes every time from when a member of the public rings 999 and we pick up that call right the way through to an appliance or an asset arrives at the incident. So that helps to reflect the full time that it has taken us to respond to that incident. And for the first time in 4 years, you'll see that we've got a stability showing in that call time. So just short of 9 minutes and 49 seconds. Again, in terms of benchmarking, you can see on the bottom of page 137 that we're around 15 seconds faster than similar services. So again, we're benchmarking well when you look at that sort of national response standard. But just draw your attention now to page 139, which is some of our protection work. And you'll see that our home fire safety visits we have undertaken over 400 visits over our target. So we've got an annual target which is assessed on risk, and the target for this year has seen us exceed that. So a really fantastic achievement by our prevention teams and our station-based colleagues who undertake this work across the communities. And importantly, on the right-hand side of that column, the 3 bullet points in the centre of the page are really, really critical, which is the really positive impact that those visits have. So over 90% of vulnerable people have reported feeling safer in their homes as a result of the visit that we have undertaken. And 90% have reported making some sort of behavioural change. So ultimately, not only do they feel safer, they've taken action to make themselves noticeably safer. So in terms of our objective to improve the safety and to make life safer for all of our communities, this is really testament to that. On page 140, we report the fire fatalities and casualties over the year, and regrettably 2025-26 did see 6 suspected fire fatalities, though it is important to note that all of those are still awaiting the coroner's investigations to confirm the actual cause of death, so the figure may change in future reports. You can see in the table on the top right where the dark shading is, that shows you where particular instances are still in the coroner's investigation. So that goes back to 2023-24 years. This does take time to work through. Next bit I was going to flag was on page 142, which is around our protection work and fire safety audit work. So here we have seen an increase, and that's really good, where you can see in the graph on the top right, in previous years we have not always achieved where we wanted to be due to changes in the team, retention and restructuring, but we're starting to see the outcomes of those changes now, with around 6% more audits undertaken than in the previous year. Our enforcement activity has reduced compared to the previous year, but this is due to a high increase in cases where we've actually been able to agree action plans and remedial plans with the responsible persons rather than needing to resort to enforcement. So it's quite a positive sort of cultural setting where we were able to come to those discussions rather than just enforcing against a business or an individual. In comparison to similar services, we do still have a bit of a gap. However, you can see in the graphs that is closing, and we hope to bring that down in the future years. Obviously, the latest benchmarking is only in 24-25, so we'll wait to see what that looks like for the previous financial year. Just drawing your attention now to page 145. The service, in terms of diversity of staff, so looking internally now, the service continues to face challenges attracting females into operational roles. Of course, many fire and rescue services across the country face a similar challenge. Additionally, we recognise that we do need to do more to continue to attract those with disabilities or non-white ethnicities into the service. We have, however, seen a really good improvement over the last few years in our disclosure rates, which you can see on the table in the centre of page 145, particularly in disclosure of religion, disclosure of disability and sexual orientation, which continue to increase year on year. Moving on to the next page, 146, staff sickness. In 25-26, we lost on average 13 working days per member of staff, which is an increase of 1.4 working days on average compared to the previous year. The reasons for that, the main cause is musculoskeletal related absence. That is also the highest short-term absence type, and we see that across our operational roles. So both on-call and hold time, musculoskeletal is the main cause of sickness. In the Green Book staff groups and with our fire control colleagues, mental health absence is the highest trend that we see. However, we do continue to better equip our managers to support colleagues who are sick. We're delivering a managing sickness training package. We've recruited a number of mental health first aiders following a refresh of that scheme internally, so that colleagues have someone who they can trust and can go to help within the organisation. Our wellbeing offer has been refreshed and relaunched, and it is also worth noting in the timeline of this, that certainly our Green and our Greybrook colleagues have gone through a significant period of change over the last 12 to 18 months, and we may be seeing some of that pull through into the sickness figures in the graph. Just moving on to finances on page 149. Our estimated cost per resident figures continue to compare really favourably to similar services. They have increased to £45.89 per resident, but it is important to know that in our similar services comparison, only West Sussex and Dorset and Wiltshire have a lower figure than Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. So, like many services, we're impacted by pay rises and we're impacted by pay and non-pay cost rises. And obviously, we've heard from the Chief Finance Officer around the current outturn position and how that will come together in October. Page 151 just provides an overview of our pathway to net zero. So this is the authority's position to be carbon neutral by 2050. So you'll see in the graph at the top of that page, we remain on track to achieve that. We are currently 21% lower carbon emissions than the baseline year of 2019-2020. So on track to hit key milestones in 2030 and then beyond into 2050. I think lastly, the last point I was going to highlight in section 2 is on page 154, which at the very bottom of that page, it just provides a snapshot of our last HMICFRS inspection. Since this report was written, we've subsequently had the outcome, and I know you've had some communication recently from the Chief Officer and others, but that the re-inspection that's mentioned in this report happened in April 2026, and we have had confirmation that one of the causes for concern has now been formally closed by the Inspectorate, and the other one, they've noted exceptional progress on the action plan on working towards closing that. So really good news on our inspection. And then finally, Chair, section 3, which is page 157 and 158, just provides a snapshot of some of the activities that we'll be delivering in terms of volume of activities we'll be delivering over the year ahead, the current 26-27 year. But happy to take questions. Members happy with myself or colleagues happy to provide context.
Thank you very much, Matt. Councillor Luciani, then Councillor Vaughan.
Two things. I think this report's brilliant to digest it, the way it looks, etc. So really well done on that. And I don't mean that patronisingly, but it is great to, and hopefully residents will read that in the same way. But I was just talking about muscular, whatever you said it was. How are we mitigating that?
So a lot of the history we've had with that are around particular incidents. So obviously firefighters, whether it's training or whether it's in operations, there can be instances where manual handling and moving around can cause inadvertent injury. We do a lot of work around sort of raising awareness, and obviously there are annual kind of fitness and readiness checks in there. But given the nature of the role firefighters do, there tends to be an element of injury that can occur. We're not a predominant outlier in that musculoskeletal, and certainly if you look at partners, particularly around the constabulary or other services where you've got a similar sort of physical kind of roles people are playing, you see a similar trend. But it is something that is very much managed within management trains, and supporting those managers to support people through that process has been our focus.
Okay, yes, Chief.
Just finally on that point, one of the aspects of change that we've done in this space is to start to explore those figures, looking through the lens of our people data. So I'm very interested to understand whether, for example, there's anything that might show an inadvertent discrimination. So, for example, if a high proportion of our female workforce was experiencing musculoskeletal injuries, I would want to explore our equipment to make sure that there's nothing there that's causing an issue. So, just for some awareness and reassurance for members, we are looking at things through that lens to ensure that there's no inadvertent discrimination occurring in any way in that area too.
That's brilliant, yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you, Chief. Councillor Vaughan.
Yeah, Matt, you may not have the figures, but could you enlighten us as to what the spend is on DEI development and training? I
Yep, I do. In terms of EDI training, I do not have that figures in front of me. I don't know if you don't have that figure. So we'll have to go away and produce that. Yeah.
We can get back to you on that on Councillor Vaughan. Councillor Carpenter.
Thank you. Following on from Councillor Lucioni's question, 13 days average lost for each staff member, that seems high. I can see that it's actually slightly lower than a couple of years ago, but it's still very high. On the mental health absence in non-uniformed staff, I just wondered what sort of things are coming up, what is actually happening there, and also and why do you think that is? Thank you.
So there's not one clear trend. There's several sort of triggers or factors associated to it. So often it can be sort of work-related stress. Part of that, we believe, is also to do with some of the change that's happened over the organisation. So members will remember, Rob's mentioned in the last report, around some of our organisational design change or restructuring. And we had our Mars mutual resignation scheme last year as well. So all of that made quite a sort of stressful, challenging kind of work environment. So we have seen some of that come through and people quoting that in terms of some of their concerns. But also the range is really broad, so it can be things at home, it can be family, it can be financial concerns, particularly with kind of cost of living, often quoted as well through things. So there's not one thing in terms of the kind of mental health, it's several factors. But obviously everyone operates within the wider system that people live in. So it's not necessarily just to do with work day, it's often external things, which obviously we don't have direct controls over. So our focus has been very much how we support people, how we make sure we've got the right signposting, how we work with organisations such as the Firefighters Charity, how we recruit support managers to support those that are feeling like that. And that's the kind of focus that we've had organisationally.
Thanks very much, Matt. We had a question from Deputy PCC, Alex.
Thanks, Chairman. Just a quick question on the response times and call handling, if that was okay. Just because I'm slightly interested in this because of a piece of work doing at the police at the moment, just looking at our response time and call handling. We, in the police, we separate the two, the calls, the time to respond, the abandonment rates, and then the grade ones in our case. So I just wanted to know, do you have that data? I'd be interested to look at it to see kind of how your time to respond to pick up 999s and also the abandonment rates, just so I can do some cross comparison to the police and see what they compare as.
Yep, absolutely. So we do absolutely have that data and we do absolutely monitor that internally. We don't include it in this report just to keep real clear focus on kind of the overall position. But our call handling is roughly 2 minutes. So roughly 2 minutes of that time is the call handling piece. But yeah, we could absolutely work with the constabulary and yourselves to look at some sort of internal benchmarking and analysis, if that's helpful.
Okay, thank you. Have Councillor Drew and Councillor Ferguson and Councillor Lucioni.
Yes, thanks, Chairman. A standard question that I ask for this: who is the report for, and do we know who's reading it? And is it something that we provide a condensed version, a pocket version that will ensure that most people have a chance to read it and it would be worth their while reading it? Because to start this, it's quite long. Can I also thank the Chief for raising the issues with regard to the musculoskeletal challenges, because it did strike me that maybe this is something that will put off those who aren't quite as physically strong. And it remains a challenge for those who are stronger than others. And if there was any discrimination, I'm glad you're looking at that. That's hugely important. In terms of where we might ask the government for more money, I see in here 90% of the people, the vulnerable people that we go and do a home visit to, change the way they behave. That's got to be a good reason for adding that to the list of things that we would say, hang on, Mr. Saviour. We'd like to have some more money for this. Mind you, he's hugely challenged because everyone wants more money for everything. So I think that, and also I agree that 13 days seems a lot, or maybe it isn't. And finally, mental health, very easy. I think it just gets bracketed So having a little bit more detail is really important. I mean, it's right that we're focusing on mental health and mental illness, but we do need to try and break it down so it's clear as to where we can provide support and where we can't, and where we need to refer it to other authorities. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Did you want to come back on any of this?
Yes, absolutely. So the who's it for? Ultimately, it is for yourselves and for the public. So it's that report back. In terms of digestibility, we do obviously include on page 134, which is the kind of at a glance of some of the key headlines, which is the infographic page. So that can be used. And then our comms team do work hard to kind of drip feed throughout the kind of months to come, kind of key messages through different platforms. So we try and make it as digestible as possible. In terms of the sickness, it's also in terms of whether the 13 days is high or not. As the report states, we are above the national average, which is around 3.7 shifts lost versus 3.7 is what we've got, versus 3.1, which is the national average. So it's not hugely out of kilter, but it is slightly out of kilter of where nationally you would expect to see some of the sickness. In terms of that, though, under the health and safety section of this report, it does highlight that we have had several quite lengthy absence-related injuries that were over 100-day absence, so that does drive some of the figures. And so some of that bridges 2 financial years, so we see that consistency. So sometimes you can just get a serious injury to one or a few people that can impact those average figures. But clearly there are people and cases behind every one of those figures that are managed locally by managers.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ferguson. Oh, sorry, could I just bring the chief in there?
Sorry, just to touch on the point that you made about whether or not the musculoskeletal injuries might put anybody off from joining. I think that's probably worth just touching on. We haven't identified any trends, which has been helpful. But just the point that you raise, I think it's important to flag selfishly as a chief fire officer. I want the absolute best of the best to become firefighters. We all do. It's an incredible privilege to be a firefighter because you're trusted by people to know what to do when they're having the worst day that they've ever had. So to have people that are the best at doing that and the most capable is crucial. What's also important to recognise, though, is that we work as part of a team. And so you don't have to be the strongest, you just have to be strong enough to be able to do the job. And it's like any team sport, you need people with a range of different skills and a range of different credentials that they bring. And with some of the work that we're doing around recruitment, actually getting people to consider that they might be a very good firefighter, they might just have never thought of it, is the most important thing. And when everybody gets to the start line, that's when they all run the race together. And then we choose the best of the best. I just want a bigger pool that I can choose from to make sure that I'm really getting the best of the best. But I hope that that helps to answer your question and provide some context around it too.
Thank you very much. I was obviously keen for an answer, and I was sure we would, and I was certain, Chief, that you were on the case. So thank you very much for reassuring us on that.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to thank all the officers who have input into this report. It's a huge report, and there's so much information there. And again, as a new member of the board, it was great for me to go through all of that information. I also wanted to congratulate everybody on the response times and managing to sustain the response time and keep it down below 10 minutes at 9.49. Particularly wanted to acknowledge that that's given the financial pressures the service is under, the staffing pressures, the demand pressures. I think that's something that we all need to acknowledge as a board. I did have one question around the differential between nighttime and daytime availability. I know that the daytime availability is much lower, and it's something that the services sort of worked on. And I wanted to ask whether that differential actually has an impact on that average response time, or whether the new tool that's been put in place, the dynamic cover tool, allows us to mitigate the fact that we have fewer vehicles and staff available to respond. And if it doesn't, what are we doing about it? Thank you.
Yeah, I'll take part of that question, and then we'll see where we see where we get to, Councillor Ferguson. So, on the response times and the difference between the daytime and the night time, obviously for our whole time cohort, that's a high availability throughout the 24/7. The difficulty comes with our on-call, and typically because in the day they could be either dual contracted with us, so they might be at a whole time fire station or doing their primary employment, so the availability is a bit more challenging. But at night time, unless they're night workers, which some of them are, it means they're at home, so therefore they're available. And of course, actually, again, typically, the night time is when we tend to see the higher sort of volume of risk. But then to answer your question on the dynamic coverage tool, that will help mitigate that in terms of putting the right resources in the right place. If we go back to the busyness of the Isle of Wight incident over the last week, and there was a question earlier around the costing of that, and when we look at there's a big on-call participation in that, in terms of not just deploying to that incident, but also then on-call stations backfilling whole-time stations. So so I suppose the short answer to that is the DCT, the dynamic coverage tool, will help. But I don't know, Rob, if you wanted to add anything. No, happy. Thanks.
Yeah, Councillor Ferguson.
So that's all very reassuring. Thank you. I just wondered, do we collect different figures for average response time in the day? Because obviously I have one figure overall. And is that something that you would be happy to share with the board? Thank you.
Yes, so the short answer is yes, we have that data. We also look at urban and rural instances, because as the Chief said, we resource to risk. So we look at what the risk is, and then we deploy our resources. So that may be using the dynamic coverage tool, it may be using detachments and moving whole-time resourcing. It could be, as you see on the Isle of Wight, it could be moving resources around as necessary. And that changes dynamically in terms of where that risk is at any season or point in, or whether it's day or night. So we look at all of that. So yeah, we have information around call and response times across all of the different kind of geographies and time frames. So we can certainly have a broader conversation into what that sort of performance looks like.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Lucioni.
I'm sorry to come back in. I know I started off this conversation, but it just reminded me how special our staff is. I obviously know that, but it reminds me that I've been the people champion for the last 2 years, and we haven't spoken about people's champion. Have we got rid of that?
It's a good question. I don't know if...
We used to have it. Can we not do it again, please? Because I'd like to do that.
It's something that we would pick up in APAG. We have the scope to appoint champions, but it's not mandatory, so it's something that we'd pick up outside of the meeting.
I'm happy about that. Those things we've spoken about today, it'd be great if we could have a little bit more in depth about that, because I'm really interested in that. Thank you.
Great, that's great. I'm sure we can add that to the next meeting and take it outside of this meeting. Councillor Ansell.
So with this, well, firstly, actually, I just want to put on record that it was a fantastic report, and like Councillor Ferguson, as a newbie here, it was really, really easy to digest and gave me all of the headliners and a bit of curiosity to have a look at some more parts. But going back to and sorry to labour this, but the musculoskeletal issues, I really wouldn't spend a huge amount of time focusing on it. If you have a look at all local authorities of all kinds, the top 2 issues for staff are mental health and musculoskeletal, whatever sort of discipline that they're in. Back in when I first started learning about health and safety, I think it used to be called strains and sprains, not musculoskeletal, and that sort of probably gives you a better idea of the sort of injuries. Obviously, it's great if we do look into it, if there is some sort of concern that it might be disproportionately affecting some people rather than others, but I would step back and just probably not get too concerned over the words so much, rather than the precise injuries. And again, facing the same sort of issues that facing Portsmouth City Council are skewed by the long-term illnesses, which sort of bring those statistics, exaggerate those statistics. And 13 days absence is absolutely brilliant compared to Portsmouth City Council's 16. So congratulations.
Okay, thanks very much, Billy. Councillor Harrison.
Yeah, thank you. I had an interesting conversation this morning with an officer who told me that there's been a spike in people having heart attacks on the Isle of Wight. Now, I suppose it's not too surprising because we know that with climate change and heat wave after heat wave after heat wave, it's a natural consequence, especially when you think about the demographics of the Isle of Wight. I'm not looking at any person particularly here,
Yes,
but
yes, you are.
it's generally an elderly population who are more at risk from heart attacks and heat strokes. And I know that the fire service have played a major role in responding to these. And my question, because we have to have a question, is are these included in the response times, the co-responding? And should we be liaising more with the ambulance service to make sure that the additional burden responding to this isn't entirely sitting with the fire service?
Thanks, David. Yep, so yes, they are included in the figure. So if we are mobilised in a medical corresponding capacity to support ambulance service, whether it's IWAS on the island or SCAS or CCAM or whoever it might be, they will be included in the figures in this report. So that's on page 135. The bottom right graph shows the kind of the comparisons there. In terms of costs, it varies depending on service in terms of how we recover those costs. There are various agreements in place, but it is one of the things being considered around how we kind of ensure the ongoing kind of stability of those kind of arrangements. But yeah, in some places we do recover, and others we don't recover fully. So there's a conversation to have around what that looks like, which is part of what Rob mentioned earlier is being looked at in terms of coming back to October once we kind of worked through the impacts of different models.
Thanks very much, Matt. Yeah.
Good morning, everyone, again. It might just be helpful just to give a context around the statement of further heart attacks, I think it was, for the Isle of Wight. So we've got two models that we operate. One is a corresponding model, which is firefighters in a car. So they take their car home and to work, etc. Now that is a fully recovered scheme from South Central Ambulance Service and is dominant for the mainland. So as a previous agreement, we're going for about 24 years or so now. So that's fully funded from that. So it doesn't come out of our funding. The other thing we did through, if you remember through COVID time, was we have highly trained firefighters in immediate emergency care with defibrillators and the equipment on board, which anyone that was here quite some time ago would know that that came through a government grant to put all that kit and train onto those fire appliances. So during COVID, we allowed those vehicles to be seen by the ambulance service, both mainland and on the island, for cardiac arrest response. Now, as much as that's cardiac arrest, and it may either be the closest defibrillator to it, so an ambulance would already be mobilised, but if there was a fire engine and defibrillator closer, they would mobilise us. The term for the Isle of Wight is there are a number of stations that volunteer to do that, because they do volunteer for that piece of work, or say we would like to be involved in that piece of work. Particularly, there is a couple of locations on the Isle of Wight where, because of their rural nature, they would always be the closest defibrillator to it, just because of that. And there are a number of call types. So as much as we call it cardiac arrest response, so we're talking about cardiac arrest, actually there's a number of different triggers that would mobilise that response. And we're looking at that in certain areas to see how we can limit that effect to us, but also support the community. So the term cardiac arrest is one we understand, someone not breathing or heart attack, but actually in the system of the ambulance service, it pulls up different figures. So it may not be cardiac arrest, it could be fitting or unconsciousness.
Okay, thank you very much. We have one more member wishing to speak, Councillor Ferguson, then if everyone's happy to move to the recommendation.
Thank you, Chair. Mine's very quick. It was just on the diversity statistics in the report, which I know we've touched on elsewhere. I noticed that for those with disabilities, the trend isn't just static, it's a downward trend. And I know in the report it comments, there's a general commentary that this is a sector-wide challenge. I just wondered again, what, if anything, we're trying to do to ensure that we are still a very diverse service. Thank you.
Yep, so the disclosure rate for disability is improving. So in terms of it's moved from 46% to 60%, so it's really positive. But certainly attracting people into the service continues to be a challenge. We've done a lot of work in trying to myth bust kind of the role of firefighters. I know we talked about musculoskeletal and things, but actually that doesn't necessarily mean that people need to be a certain, or physical ability to a certain point. It's actually trying to myth bust that and say that diversity in terms of disability can obviously be everything from neurodiversity through to all sorts of other kind of roles. And also the fact that these figures include not only operational roles, but non-operational roles. What you're seeing here is the overall position. But if you look at the non-operational version of this, it's highly diverse in terms of that skill set. So we are actually seeing people with disabilities or different ethnicities and things much stronger in the kind of Green Book workforce than maybe we're seeing in the operational one. So a lot of the focus on the operational side is around education and, as the Chief said earlier, getting people to see the role and understand the role and then be able to make a more informed decision about what's required. But I think on the Green Book side, that diversity is quite broad, and we don't actually pull that out in this report in terms of the difference, because we do attract a huge diversity of staff through other routes into the service.
Okay, thank you very much. Matt, can I just ask if you had any closing remarks to add at all?
No, only to thank members for the positive feedback on the visual and layout of the report. I'll take that back to the teams who work very hard to try and make sure quite a complicated set of data is digestible. So thank you for that comment.
Brilliant, thank you very much. So members, can we move to the recommendation which is on page 118, it might be on page 120 for Councillor Madrick, that recommendation is that the 2025-26 annual performance report to be noted by the full authority. Are we happy for that to be noted, members? Yeah. Noted. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, moving to item 11, which is property matters, pages 161 to 164. This report contains two recommendations. Recommendation 3 and 4, which relates to exempt Appendix A. Can I ask members to confirm if they've read the exempt appendices and to indicate whether you have any questions or debate, would like to debate any matters contained in them in an exempt session at all? Councillor Ferguson.
I just have one question on the exempt paper. So.
Okay, no, that's absolutely fine. Okay, bear with me. Okay, so Councillor Ferguson, so if your question or debate relating to that exempt appendices, the relevant recommendation will be deferred until those appendices have been considered in the exempt session, which is under item 14. Okay. I'd like to invite Matt to introduce the report, please.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a standard report. You're seeing two of them today, for example, that come through to report retrospective property and estate-related actions that either officers have taken under delegated authority, that authority is outlined in paragraph 5 of page 161, or where something falls outside of that authority, where we need to seek your approval, which is part of the conversation today. So paragraph 8 outlines the two actions in this report which have been taken under delegated authority, and paragraph 9 refers to an exempt appendix and seeks your approval. Happy to take questions for the public item now.
Are there any questions or debate relating to the public item here? No. Okay, Matt, any closing remarks at all from yourself? Okay. Can I just ask the marshalling officer, in terms of the recommendation here, the way forward to proceed?
Yes, I mean, you could take recommendation 2 and then move to the
session. Okay. Can we have a vote on recommendation 2, please, then, members? All those in favour? Great, agreed. Thank you. Right, okay, so item 12, which is exclusion of press and public. So This should have interesting ones. Thank you very much.